Question going back to earlier on in the book that I was speaking about. Why was the Prophet called a Sabian? That's an interesting point. And because we're not too sure today who the Sabians exactly were. There were, generally, my understanding, you see, there's a difference of opinion. Some people feel that they were to do with like a kind of a Hanifi, by Hanifi I mean a free-spirited kind of religiosity to God. But it wasn't institutionalized. It wasn't that they weren't part of any kind of religion like that. They were kind of just like wanderers that just believed in a supreme being, and they just did good things and meditated. A bit like how you'll maybe describe a like a mystic today, but a mystic today, I suppose it has a lot of that kind of connotation of mysticism, but it's basically somebody upon a non-institutionalized way of faith, of religion. And they just did their own thing, just had set of good morals. A bit like saying today, a humanist except with the God element. So if you had somebody like that. So that seems to be the understanding, that there were a group of people that were like that, maybe down in southern Arabia first and then in other parts of Arabia. And when the Prophet began Islam, began preaching, that he was associated with those people. So they said to him, because it is true, a lot of in the Meccan period, they didn't used to refer to them as Muslims. They would refer to them as Sabians. As in the non-Muslims would refer to Muslims as Sabians. And this term Muslims, I don't even think Muslims referred to themselves as Muslims till much after anyway. I think Fred Donner does have a point that Muslims, early Muslims, referred to themselves as mu'min, believers. And they didn't, this Islam, Islamization of Islam is a later development. I do think so. Not that it's so much of a big deal. I don't think it massively changes anything. It's just a nuance changes, that's all. But so early Muslims, they won't call themselves, like the Sahaba wouldn't have most likely identified as we are Muslims. They would have probably said we are mu'mineen. And it wasn't this kind of, and they wouldn't generally, I don't think they referred to the deen as the deen, like Islam, as like they recognize, because Islam means submission, so they did recognize that. And by the way, there was a tradition before Islam that also used the term Islam. He does cover it in the book as well. But I don't think, they obviously knew the term Islam, and it's not that they would never have ever used it in their lives. But I don't think they generally, the way we today will say, oh, I believe in Islam, it's a religion, we are Muslim. This kind of setup was a later setup. They had it a bit more natural. So they most likely didn't refer to the deen as Islam, probably just as, they probably generally didn't have a lot of structuralization to the deen. It was still natural and organic. Right, the title of that book is Arabs, a 3,000-Year History. So, yeah, so that's my understanding, that's what I think they were referring to the Prophet as. There is another understanding that they were referring to him as the Sabians, as the Zoroastrians were referred to as Sabians. Generally they were referred to as Majus. It does appear in the Quran as well, the term Majus. Now, this is what the Zoroastrians were generally referred to as. Some people said there was another prophet that had a book, and they were had scripture, and they were called the Sabians. But we don't seem to know. This seems to be a lost part of our history. The term does come in the Quran, where Allah speaks of it positively, the Sabians. But once again, we are not too sure today what they actually were. We're kind of all, it's guesswork. It's guesswork. somebody said, what about the hadith of Ali that mut'a is haram? How did we go from Sabians to mut'a? This is, well, we'll come to that. That's always a fun topic, isn't it? But let's just